And as the Qatar drones out, all right, that's the new intro to our show. Welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 28. My name's Lee. I am in Western Australia this week. I'm joined by Vickers in Canberra.
Yo!
Austin in Sydney.
Hello.
And Tim in Victoria.
Hey.
Cool. And this week we're going to be talking about domestic violence. We're also going to be talking about immigration and visa denying shenanigans, courtesy of Mr. 1P Dutton. So maybe we'll start with that because it might lead into a discussion of the domestic violence via Chris Brown, since he's also a part of this. So in the last month or so, we've had two very high-profile visa bannings, denyings. I don't know what the appropriate word. I guess it's denying. Tyler, the Creator, is a rapper.
I think I might correct you. His application was pending, but he spat the dummy and said, right, I'm withdrawing my Australian tour. So I don't think we did learn the outcome of that. But Chris Brown was definitely denied.
Yes.
And also just happened today.
Troy Newman, who's an anti-abortion activist. So, and both the actually all three are kind of together in the, basically coming from women. Yeah. So it's coming from feminists. It's coming from the left, trying to get these people denied visas, or in the latter two cases, actually getting them denied. So,
my favorite part. Sorry. My favourite part about this entire topic is both people from the left and people from the right getting outraged and upset that maybe someone they wanted to come here was getting banned, purely by laws that they themselves had boosted up over the years. Whether it was, character tests for people coming into the country, or whether it was, it was just character tests for people coming into the country. And this is the consequence, right? You will when you politicize something like immigration, receive politically charged outcomes based on the body politic of the day. And that means we're not going to have Chris Brown here.
And going back to last year, there was also that pickup artist. What was his name? Julian Blank. His visa was cancelled while he was here. That was Scott Morrison did it. And then
he got
negged. Hard to get.
And then there was also, this is another factor, and it's not just the immigration minister saying no, it's also lobby groups putting pressure on venues to cancel appearances. They tried to get last year Sherry Tenpenny out here. For those who don't know her, she's the most prominent anti-vaxxer there is, so she withdrew because of all the outrage about it. So basically, a lot of this is the outrage machine as well. If someone comes in we don't like, they've got to be stopped by any means necessary.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing. So the Chris Brown thing. So this comes from the fact that he assaulted Rihanna, whose then girlfriend, back in 2009. So it's a 6-year-old assault charge,
and he's been
which he was convicted of.
Can I just say, he's been in the country 3 times since then.
Yeah.
And he was welcomed with open arms. This is just the first time we've decided to ban him out.
But in both the cases of the Tyler, the Creator, and I guess the Julian Blanc as well as this Troy Newman, it's purely free speech. Like, it's essentially the grounds in which people are trying to get them out of the country or stop them from coming to the country because of things they've said. In the case of Troy Newman, he essentially, like a lot of people who are against abortion, thinks that abortion is murder, but he co-wrote a book basically saying that people should be charged with murder, and, in the US, you can be executed for murder. So essentially the argument was we should be executing murderers and abortion clinics, and people who get abortions are murderers, therefore they should be executed. It's pretty radical stuff, but it's not,
it's not that much of a leap in logic.
No.
If you believe, that it's murder and that murder should carry a capital offence.
Yeah.
It is actually not that much of a leap, and I don't think his views are all that out of whack in a large part of the world.
Yeah.
Well, regardless of whether they're right or wrong, and I personally think they're both wrong and offensive, it doesn't actually influence his right to say them.
Yeah, exactly. Opinion. And the guise of which, and this has come from Labor as well, like MPs in this particular case, it was MPs putting pressure on Peter Dutton. They were saying, you know, he might it might lead to violence against women. Well, what he's arguing though is not that people should just start shooting up abortion clinics.
No,
he's arguing that they should be charged with a crime, convicted of a crime, and then receive the penalty of that crime, which in the case in the US is death in some circumstances. So, I mean,
and he comes from a country which does have the death penalty. So.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's I mean, it's one of those things where the logic which they're using, like, even if you take away the fact that, like, putting aside that, okay, people should be free to speak what they say, even the logic they use to attack these people is completely faulty. Like, there's no logic at all that makes any sense.
So here's the thing. Effectively, what this is trying to do is create a little bubble, a sort of...
Actually, no, hold up. I don't actually think that's the case. It's not trying to create a bubble. It's trying to send a message. Because anyone, for example, I just Googled Chris Brown, and I can watch all of his songs right now. I'm sure I could do the same for anyone else who's been there. I could listen to these ideas. It's not trying to create a bubble. It's trying to send a message. It's saying, we don't want these people here, therefore we're going to basically take away their right to be in this country. And that's the problem. It's not about stopping people from hearing them. No one, I think, in their right mind believes that.
And I was going to make the point later on, but seeing as you brought me to it earlier, what this suffers from is a massive Barbra Streisand effect. Now, the Streisand effect, as people might not be familiar with, is Barbra Streisand launched a court case against Google for taking photos of her house. In effect, the court case brought so much attention that people started taking a lot more look at her house.
Yeah.
Now, effectively, the government has given way more ammunition, way more attention, way more, I guess you could say, visibility to these people than they probably would have gotten if they just came here.
Yeah.
Right?
What's the old saying? If someone has crazy views, ignore them.
Yes.
Like, whatever happened to that?
Well, even aside from that, though, like, I think even if they'd come to Australia and they'd been protested, or if there'd been some other form of people saying no or rejecting their views, I mean, I think that's much more sensible. Essentially, by doing what they're doing is they're making martyrs of these people, and saying, what was it?
Martyrs,
well, maybe not martyrs, but like, I'm trying to think of what Tyrion Lannister says in Game of Thrones. He says, you know, like something about silence, like, you know,
when you cut a man's tongue off, you don't silence him. Sorry, no, you don't stop him from being right. Yeah.
I hate that I have to be in a position where I'm defending, or seem to be defending, an anti-vaxxer and Chris Brown. It offends me that I am forced to defend their rights, and quite frankly, they're probably bad people.
But you know, that is the mark of free. Look, it is the mark of free speech to defend speech that you don't like. If you're only defending speech that you like, you don't support free speech. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
Right? Because free speech is about stuff that is not popular.
Yeah.
Popular speech doesn't need protecting.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But actually, I just want to correct one thing though. The Chris Brown thing is not about free speech. There is no free speech element to beating your woman up. I'm sorry.
His songs, like, he's not coming to perform songs like, I'm glad that I beat up Rihanna or something like that. That's not what his lyrics are.
No, I'd like to see his take on Prodigy Smack My Bitch Up.
Yeah, no thanks. No, and that's a fair point. So I guess that becomes the question of what is the purpose of a character test. Should Chris Brown be kept out because of like essentially a 6-year-old assault charge?
We probably have to differ between criminals and non-criminals. Like in the Troy Newman case, he is not a criminal at all. It's just because people didn't like his views.
Yeah.
So based on if you've got no criminal history, why should you be denied entry to wherever you want to go?
So the interesting thing about this is, and I was having a chat with, I won't mention her name, but I was having a chat with the lawyer about this earlier, and she pointed out that before, I think it was like before about 6 or 7 years ago, the only time this character test had ever been used was to deport Nazi war criminals, right? And the history of it was like, it got used a little bit. It was brought in originally to deal with Nazi war criminals. they were taken out, you know, basically fit and proper test. They committed fraud against the Australian government by lying about who they were, etc., etc., etc. And that was fine. People were willing to accept it. And for a long time, this never got used. No immigration minister ever touched it. Then all of a sudden, it started getting used by the Gillard years. I can't remember who the first case was.
I think it was they delayed Gert Wilders' visa when he first came out here.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of it. They delayed it just to mess with him. But now it's, really got out of hand.
Yeah, so effectively what we're doing is we're taking some legislation that was written to deal with Nazi war criminals, right, that has been since boosted up, and dealing it to try and sanitize what we let into this country in terms of, you know, for what people can talk to. I think the actual effect of this might be in terms of live, you know, live music, in terms of live public discourse, we will become a cultural wasteland. I mean, it's not like Austin said, we can still go online and take a look at it. But in terms of going out and listening to these people talk, we will be a cultural wasteland, right? Just because we don't allow new ideas in, and this is how civilizations essentially fall.
We're already a political wasteland with our churn of political leaders.
Well, maybe. Even to go to the Chris Brown thing. So, I mean, essentially, I mean, the penalty he received for his crime was 5 years probation and like community service hours and all that sort of stuff. So he didn't receive jail time, which, I mean, yes, it is terrible to hit a woman. However, if you only receive that sort of punishment, it's unlikely, like it wasn't, you know, we can say that some crimes are more serious than others. So if he killed Rihanna, that's clearly an incredibly serious crime. She received some injuries, apparently she'd be hospitalised. Okay, but he served the penalty for his crime. Like, he's already paid, he did his time theoretically because he was on probation. I guess, you know, if we were to look at the criminal records of other people coming to Australia, I'm willing to bet there's people who actually have served jail time for assault. There'd be people who done all sorts of different things that they've actually were more serious than this. It was just that Chris Brown assaulted a very high-profile woman, and he got busted in a very public manner. Like, if I'm sure there's plenty.
They're talking about his new tattoo now for some reason. Apparently, it's got something to do with the tattoo.
Okay, well, nevertheless, I think it's one of those things that I think it's inconsistent. I don't think we should be supporting the inconsistent application of the law. Like, if every single person who received a criminal penalty of probation or worse for assault, who was being kept out of Australia, I'd say, okay, fair enough. But this guy's being singled out because he hit a woman, a high-profile woman, and he's high-profile himself. And so it's really, this is not about the principle, it's about the politics.
I would argue it's actually not even the first one, it's the second one. It's the fact that he's high profile.
Yeah.
If he had hit a non-high profile person, if he had assaulted a non-high profile woman, he still would have probably been kept out for the same reason. Look, I'll be honest, I'm not losing any sleep about Chris Brown
same here.
himself not being allowed in the country, but I think Lee hit on that. It's about the inconsistent application of the law. Rule of law is a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
And if you're just going to allow people, basically the government, to do political showmanship and exclude someone because they think it'll get them brownie points, that to me is a bad system. Any system that allows that to happen.
Yeah.
And if you have any doubt that that's the reason they're doing this, just ask yourself, how many less women are going to be assaulted because Chris Brown can't do his tour here? And if you think the answer is anything different than zero, I'd love to see your chain of reasoning.
Yeah.
And yeah, is it a coincidence the fact that Chris Brown was denied a visa in the same week that the government announced their domestic violence package?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I just had a quick search on Google to see like other celebrities have been, found guilty of assault. Justin Bieber has been found guilty of assault, and yet he's been paraded across television all week.
I think who did he assault though?
His ATV collided with a minivan. Which is, I mean, that's pretty dangerous stuff.
That's right. That was that woman. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
did he hit a woman?
Yeah, it was a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just literally like a 10-second search on Google, and we've already found so this is where I guess I sort of think, I mean, it's just
another one.
So you know what Chris Brown should have done? He should have come back with, "Is it because I'm black?"
Yeah, the Ali G thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
but no. So it always comes back to inconsistent application of law in this case. And not just that, but why would you give when you give politicians power over stuff like this, the inevitable consequence is that it's going to be political showmanship, right? Yeah. I mean, it's in everything. Like, it's the same reason why we don't let them anywhere near the interest rate. Because if they could set the interest rate,
yeah,
right? Can you imagine? It's just like people are complaining that getting houses is too hard. Let's set the interest rate to 0.
Wait a sec. I believe I've seen that all the time in the last few years in the US, for example.
Yeah. And there they do let them control it. Yeah. And there they do experience massive credit defaults and stuff like that. So, you know, the independence of the RBA was something good that we did here.
The politicians are they're mainly responding to social media campaigns.
Which is the worst part, because social media is vacuous, and as much as I spend time on it, I'm basically going on it to just bullshit my ass off about whatever it is that we want to talk about.
Yeah. So part of this is the outrage industry as well. And also, it's the fact that, this leads into our other topic, that we're told we're in this national emergency of domestic violence, and that, like with terrorism, some rights have to be suspended. Like, for example, Michaela Cash was talking about the other day that she wanted to look at banning Grand Theft Auto because of its violence against women. So
it's already banned. Well, rather, it's
sanitized.
Sanitized, yeah.
Sorry, no. Well, not really. Well, you can still do the things that they didn't like. So, I mean...
And there was also the fact that Coles bowed to pressure from the Collective Shout group to remove Zoo Weekly from their shelves. It's since Zoo Weekly's gone under now, but the fact Coles withdrew it because this organisation said that we need to get rid of this magazine because of this crisis that we're in.
Well, I think it's a bad argument and it was a silly action, but that's a private actor influencing a private actor, and all I'll do is I'll say, look, that's stupid.
Yeah, and a company's stupid for buying into it.
When the outrage industry has its hands on the levers of governmental power, which it really firmly does in Australia.
Or in the case this week of $100 million of taxpayer money.
But the thing is, so what really bothers me is, they're pointing to the statistic of, you know, the domestic violence, you know, what is a BOSCAR and a whole bunch of crime statistics showing that violence against women has increased over the last couple of years. But I'm sitting there, I'm going, the same thing happened in Sweden once they made it easier for women to report domestic violence. And if you take a look at these statistics, when you compare like-for-like statistics, you've got countries which have atrocious records on domestic violence, like, you know, Saudi Arabia and India, who are amongst the lowest in the world. But you have countries that are, you know, downright progressive when it comes to, you know, violence against women, like Sweden and Australia, any Scandinavian country, and Australia and New Zealand and America to a lesser extent, even Canada, right? Our statistics are really high. And I'm sitting there and going, hang on. We've been trying really hard for the last, you know, 10 years or so to get women to start reporting it. Maybe that's actually working, and that's what we're actually seeing. Can we, you know, can we actually let it see what's going on over a couple of years after these programs come into full fruition, instead of jumping on the bandwagon right now? But then again, this is just me as someone who looks at numbers all day going like, oh, hang on, I'm starting to see some correlation here.
And it's not like our society. I mean, our leaders are making out that we've only just learnt that violence against women is bad now, that we're discovering it, or that it wasn't a crime before. It's always been a crime, and it's always been taught that it's the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's just now we've made it easier to report it, and it's starting to show up in the statistics.
Yeah, I mean, there could be an element of it's the issue of the time. You know, maybe there has been less attention to it before, and now it's become more high profile. Maybe in a few months it will go back on the back burner. I mean, you think about climate change in 2008, 2009, you know, or that sort of 2006 to 2008 period. It was the big dominating issue. Now it's less so, maybe, you know, and issues kind of cycle through prominence in terms of the media. I guess it's for me, it's a hard question to sort of answer Is it because it actually is?
I'll be honest. I think this is one of those cases where if government is going to be spending taxpayer money, and it's going to be doing anything, I think preventing violence is a pretty good thing that it can be doing with that. Now, because it's clearly designed to gain political points, and because it's a big lump sum of money being thrown at a problem which hasn't really been discussed as a national stage before this point, we threw a big sum of money on it. That's very likely evidence in my mind that it's not going to be spent efficiently, that we're not going to get value for this money. But of all the things the government spends money on, I think this is probably not the worst thing to spend money on by any means.
No, and I'll agree with you. I would love programs that actually target reducing violence. My issue with it is the actual narrative is phrased in ways to basically suppress elements of speech, or basically, like, it's such a quintessential thing, right? So, domestic violence, right? It occurs at homes, right? But you still need someone to complain, right? You still need someone to raise the flag. What can the government actually do? That's my question.
Well, spending money on something always sounds good. I mean, we're going to...
Well, I mean, just looking at the sort of, like, the packages that sort of presented, just like when it was announced, you got things like domestic violence training for hospital workers. There's stuff to do with... well, see, they've got stuff to do with changing attitudes. I mean, and it brings some statistics up, which, given what's going on with the rape, the stuff to do with rape on college campuses in the US, like, I'm always wonder about how accurate statistics really are. But nevertheless, they've got stuff to do with changing attitudes. They've got an expansion to the Safe at Home programs, which support women and children to remain in their home and for the perpetrator to be moved. Yeah, so there are probably some things, you know, shelters for women. Yeah, so there is some stuff the government do. It's probably... I mean, I think probably a lot of this stuff needs to be done at a state level, which, I mean, this comes into the whole fiscal imbalance thing. But really, I mean, the federal government doesn't really need to be doing any of this. It really should be state governments. And I guess just another thing to go with the rhetoric, I'm always, like, whenever the whole notion of a national crisis is used as a justification for the federal government to get involved, I start to get really, really iffy, because I sort of think, really, there's very few things that are truly a national crisis. Like, generally things involve national crisis are things that are involving tanks and missiles and bombs and subs and stuff like that. Defending the borders of the country is a national priority, the national kind of issue. Most of this stuff, ICE, domestic violence, you know, take your pick. Very few of them are actually genuinely national issues. And getting the feds involved is just... Well, it just gives you another 300 politicians to grandstand, and I'd rather not give them 226 or whatever it is. Yeah,
and the politicians in this issue feel that they can grandstand because they're given so much, fed so much by these lobby groups. I mean, you were talking about before that why has this issue come to prominence? It was really unleashed when Julia Gillard said that, you know, she was being attacked as Prime Minister for being a woman, and this set off this whole Destroy the Joint Facebook group and really galvanised the feminist movement, which is largely behind this push.
Yeah, I don't actually have any problem with them being galvanised or anything like that. The issue is essentially I have with government, like the federal government per se, taking this on. And like I said, exactly how much is it that they can possibly do? A lot of the stuff is basically state-based programs. And I would argue even more, it's more local-based as well. I don't think the problem is as universal across Australia as they say it is. I can imagine certain pockets here and there having it. But it's just not going to be prevalent throughout. It's not.
Miranda Devine getting in a lot of trouble for talking about, essentially, I think rightly pointing out that Indigenous communities have a much, you're much more likely to be assaulted as a woman in an remote Indigenous community than you are in, anywhere else. So it is.
Community, full stop, will be more likely to have this. That statistic is universal. Yeah. Women in remote communities are at a higher risk.
Essentially poor communities. I mean, that's the other thing. So it just happens that remote Aboriginal communities are even poorer than everybody else. But
I'm a little bit iffy on that one because there are statistics to indicate that wealthier women just don't report the.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And the reason why that's supported is the largest increase in the reporting has come from middle class women and middle and upper class women.
Mm.
So that's the largest increase. They're not the largest number, not by far.
People, I might just say people are going to criticize this podcast because it's 4 men talking about domestic violence.
Yeah, well, meh. I'm just like, I can't help it if no women wanted to put their hands up for this episode. We do have women who are like in our little group. Unfortunately, they weren't available tonight, and I wasn't going to sit around and wait until the end of the week. And like, this is the problem. If you are a woman and want to appear on this show, by all means, send me a Facebook message or even send a message on the group.
Yeah. Send your name, your number, and a headshot, please. Biggest will be in touch.
No, nothing like that. No, I'm serious about this. Like, people complain that, we have such a small... The thing is, we actually have a significant group full of people who can appear on the show and get, like, frequent... literally what happens is every Monday morning, Lee sends a message out for who wants to be on the episode today. And it's always a small number of people that answer. That is the only reason we don't have diversity or whatever. I'm happy to take on people who can appear regularly. And all you really need is a microphone, a good connection, and Skype.
Maybe we should implement a quota system.
I honestly, that would just like kill my show.
We should have an episode that's just us voting somebody off to make room for a woman. That'd be hilarious. No, I mean, like, maybe we can just sort of briefly touch on the issue because we've still got a few minutes left. But yeah. I mean, I think it's if you start asking the question, what do women want? Okay, that's something that's probably best answered by women. But if you talk about what is the most effective use of public money, or what is the most, how can we bring freedom to bear in these areas? Like, I think that's a question that anybody should be able to look at because it's essentially a value judgment based on principles that are eternal, So
and also another factor to consider is $100 million going to help organisations such as the child protection agencies, which is slightly related to this. I mean, there was the news story recently about the death of that young girl Chloe Valentine at the hands of her mother, who made her ride a motorcycle. The fact that there was so many calls for help to child protective services. So ordinary people are recognising problems in the broader area, but the government is just not capable of solving them because...
So, tests to apply in cases like this is what if we just gave money to the victims? Vicus did a similar thing with industry assistance a number of years ago. So just looking at the numbers, we're spending $100 million. Last year, about 500,000 women were victims of domestic violence. So we could have given them all $200 as a replacement. And the question is, will this program make them more than $200 better off, the future victims, or will it have less than $200 of value to each of them? And if the answer is less, it's probably a bad spending program. Yeah. It's probably not going to be as good as doing nothing or just sending checks to people who are victims of domestic violence. And that sounds cynical and harsh, but that's just how the numbers work.
Yeah.
And I actually had a conversation with this. Well, somebody asked me this week, somebody who's a social worker who's not a libertarian, a friend of mine, she asked me what I thought, like what libertarians think on things like domestic violence and those sorts of things. And I mean, one of the things, and something we haven't really been able to go into, but one of these libertarians often ask is, well, how does the government make this issue hard for people to change? So, you think about, like, we might say, well, let's look at the economics of women working. You say, well, okay, labor regulation makes it hard for a woman to get a job. So if they're more like, if they're trapped in poverty because they can't get a job because they don't have they're really low skilled, or the welfare traps keep them in, and all this stuff. So there's also a whole bunch of structural issues that go beyond than just, will this $100 million fix it? And I think in some ways the $100 million is it's easy for politicians to do that. It's much harder for them to say, well, let's look at the issues around all the sorts of regulations we have. Self-defense is another one. Like if you want to get an issue of could a woman get a handgun to protect herself from her abusive partner? Well, the answer is no. And not only is it no, but we've also seen instances where women who were repeatedly threatened with being murdered, they were being, in the process of their family being attacked, they defend themselves by stabbing this crazed ex-boyfriend, and then they find themselves being found guilty of assault or of murder, of manslaughter. So there's all those issues which we just don't have time to get into right now. But it's a much broader issue than just will this $100 million work. We should actually also ask the question, what other incentives are involved that change the dynamic for women to be able to protect themselves firstly, defend themselves and their children, and also to have the sorts of resources at hand to escape, to get themselves out of these situations. So anyway, any final words?
Violence against women is bad.
It's terrible, yeah.
Yeah, well, violence in general is a bad thing, but violence against women is particularly bad because generally the societal structures taught them to be more servile, and
men are physically stronger.
Yeah, that too. And unfortunately, that's one of the things we've started unwinding in our culture, particularly here in Australia, and that's one thing we should be supportive of. Women should definitely report when they've experienced violence against them, and that's probably the biggest takeaway message that we should take from this, and that civil society should do a better job in stepping in these cases.
Well, on that,
the problem is not that we're not spending enough money on it, or that Chris Brown could come to the country. The problem is that if Chris Brown came to the country, millions of people would pay to see this asshole sing songs. That to me is a problem. That's a cultural problem. The fact that people don't seem to give a shit that he's a total douchebag.
Hang on. We had Kanye West here just earlier this year.
I'm gonna let you finish, but Chris Brown is worse than Kanye West.
All right, and on that amazing revelation, we'll finish up this episode of Taking Liberties. We'll be back next week with more discussion, and thanks for joining us.
See ya.
Bye.
Peace.